Lydia Oosterhoff is one of the lawyers who's been involved right the way through this inquiry into state care in New Zealand and the abuse in state care. It is horrific, and you've been well and truly made aware of what's in it now. It's such a detailed report. I've seen nothing like this in my time covering politics and public events in 30 years. It is the most astonishingly confronting, but also a report that is so comprehensive that I don't think anything else touches it. It is a piece of work. It genuinely is. And Lydia joins us now. Lydia, g'day, good morning, nice to have you on.
Good morning, thank you for having me.
What a report. It must have been, well, firstly, just for you, an exhausting piece of work, and hearing so many of these harrowing stories. I know it's your job, but boy, you can't help but be affected by it.
Yeah, it was a long 6 years, but yesterday was an absolutely momentous occasion, and I think everyone that was there left with hope that the last 6 years were not in vain, that something is going to come out of it. So, yeah, it is hard work, but it's also very rewarding in a strange way.
Well, it's about finding some justice hopefully taking place. But what worries me is, and it's an astonishing piece of work, and I wonder where it ends up, because so often you see governments shelve things, especially as they start to get cold, as the reports start to get cold and gather dust. And I just wonder if the apology is going to become a little bit late. Why does it take 3 months to make an apology, 3 or 4 months to make an apology? And what comes with the apology? What sort of sincere compensation can or will be offered?
Yeah, so, I mean, exactly. You have to ask the Prime Minister about why it's taking 3 months. We're not in control of that. But what the report has recommended is that the apology needs to be a lot wider. The report has recommended that church leaders, including the Pope, need to apologise, that the Public Service Commissioner needs to apologise, the Solicitor General needs to apologise. So I guess the question is, what is an effective apology, and how does that get to survivors? And I know part of the idea of doing it in Parliament was so that it brings all the parties together, but this should not be about the politicians. This should be about the survivors, and I think the survivors need to have an input into what a proper apology looks like, and that it is worded in a way that actually helps undo some of the harm that was caused to them.
Will an apology, which is only coming after 6 years of pushing for it, be adequate? Or is it about what they're sorry for? It really comes down to the semantics and what's actually said, doesn't it?
Yes, and we heard the politicians apologising yesterday in Parliament, but it was the same kind of rhetoric. From the bottom of my heart, I apologise to you, and I think there needs to be actually more than that, because there needs to be a consideration of what they're apologising for. And part of that comes down to, for years and years and years, the state has tried to suppress this. They have tried to say that this was maybe one or two bad apples, and children, when they complained, were silenced. They were not believed. They were told they were lying. And so I think we've got to realise that these people that were abused have high levels of distrust in the state. And so the PM saying, I'm sorry, that's not going to right the wrong. And so that's why I think survivors really need an input in what an actual apology looks like. And an apology in itself is not going to be enough. There needs to be redress that comes with it. And going back to your earlier report about your earlier comment about does the report just get shelved? Well, that's what we're concerned about too, because obviously in 2021 we had the Puritumu Turuwhanui redress report. Now, one recommendation of those 95 recommendations has been implemented. And so you've got to ask, why has that not been acted on? So many millions of dollars has been spent on this Royal Commission of Inquiry. People have worked for 6 years, done amazing work, uncovered things that no one, well, people did know, but public didn't know. And so then that report suggested that redress needs to be not just compensation, not just a verbal or written apology. It needs to be wraparound support services for survivors to undo some of the things that were caused to them as part of their time in state care. So that's small things like tattoo removal, addiction support getting housing, support. So it's got to be a wraparound kind of service for survivors to help them to reintegrate into society in a way.
Our jails are full of these guys. It's very rare to go into a jail and meet someone who hasn't come through the system of one of the boys' homes or borstalls or whatever. Would you go as far to say that there needs to be a review of who's in prison and whether their cases are reviewed and released? I mean, would you go that far?
I don't. Well, they're treading on the criminal justice system there. I think what is important is that we recognise what we call the state care pipeline. So a child starts coming to notice for care and protection concerns. Mum might be drinking or leaving them at home alone. And what we see time and time again, and I need to stress here, this is not a historic issue. We've got clients that are 18 and it's still happening, and you see it in the records. Yeah, you see it in the records. Notification out of the notification, care and protection notification, nothing's done, files closed. Finally, the child comes to notice for normally petty offending, so then it's youth. If they're over 14, they go to youth justice. Keeps the same cycle going. The care and protection concerns aren't addressed, and finally they end up in the adult jail. So, I mean, I don't think I have the expertise to say that we can go into prisons and release people who have, because the truth is, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, some of these people are serious offenders, but we have to recognise where that offending started. And the first step, I think, would be to start by working with children that are in care today to prevent them becoming those serious offenders in the future. So that means care and protection needs to be very well resourced. We need wraparound services within communities.
We don't have any of these things now, but we don't. We are so under-resourced, though, Lydia. We are so. If you look at the issues now in our society, people can't get addiction services now. People can't get wraparound services now. They wonder where they're gone. They wonder where they are. Where are these so-called things that we talk about? We simply don't fund these things and resource these things for current demand. Let alone what it would be if we open the gates on this one.
Yeah, well, how about we see it as an investment? So if we stop people becoming young offenders now and becoming adult offenders in the future, that's going to save us millions and billions in costs to corrections. If we get people in healthy housing, that's going to save us millions in the future in health costs. So it needs to be looked at as a future investment rather than a large upfront cost. And I think that's really important, that actually this idea of helping vulnerable families, because let's be honest, most of the people that come into state care are vulnerable, and their families are vulnerable. So how about, instead of focusing on incarcerating them when they become adults, how about we focus on supporting their whānau when they're young, and then in 20 years we will save the cost of having to pay for incarceration.
Yeah. Drug courts, I think they work amazingly. I think that the results speak for themselves. Yeah, we only have 3 of them, 2 in Auckland and 1 in Hamilton. Yet these things are at capacity. They could take so many more people. You know what I'm talking about, obviously. And the reviews of them and the success of them has been phenomenal. Yet no one's talking about creating more of them. These things change lives. And the drug courts change lives, you know.
Yes, yeah. I actually worked on the pilot back in 2012, I think. And they haven't expanded it since then, and I don't understand why, because they do work.